Hi, everybody. I'm Kat Carter, head of marketing at Hubbub, and a longtime Case Conference attendee. And I'm so missing being able to see all of your lovely faces in person. And I hope that very soon we can all get back together to share our thoughts, maybe a few drinks, with one another soon. I also I'm going to apologize now. A bit of a croaky throat today, so apologies if I need to pause or have a break quickly to adjust and sort that out. But I want to thank you so much for joining myself and Jenna from LBS for this session on Giving Days over the years, especially given the events of the last few months. So I'm going to start us off by giving a bit of background on where Giving Days came from and what we've seen over the last few years. And then Jenna will discuss the experience that the team at LBS have seen over their 5 years of running Giving Days. And then I'll come back at the end to run through some of what we've learned, as well as a few predictions for what we thought might happen and for what lies ahead for Giving Days of the future. So way back in 2012, Giving Tuesday really kicked things off for the Giving Day, and that the kind of trend that we are now seeing, which I think is no longer a trend, but starting to be an established part of programmatic planning for giving programs, and not just with regular giving, but giving across the entire spectrum, including major gifts. And there are a handful of institutions who are running Giving Days of their own. However, the initiative really brought the idea into the light, encouraging more institutions, mostly in the US, to move forward with an online campaign. And as Giving Tuesday picked up over the years, so too did Giving Days. But with more institutions choosing to run them at times of the year that suited their calendar and institutional cultures. And we get asked all the time, should we run our Giving Day on Giving Tuesday? And usually our advice is to choose a different day because Giving Tuesday can be so full of noise, especially in the US. It's not something that really picked up in the UK, but that finding a dedicated time that means something to your culture, to your community, to your institution is actually better than running something on Giving Tuesday when you're facing that kind of crowded market. And I thought this comic from our friends at Community Funded uh, put that pretty into perspective. So, um, so this graph from Google Trends also puts it into perspective. So this is from the U.S., which gives a bit of insight into how Giving Days changed over the years in in that aspect. A similar proportion of people you can see through the spikes here. These are the November kind of Giving Tuesday spikes. But as the years go on, the spikes in between each of the Giving Tuesday spikes start to become greater each year. So you can see them starting to pick up speed here, and then really starting to pick up in kind of 2017, and where we start to see a more kind of spring, summer, autumn season of Giving Days. We have kind of a different picture here in the UK, but I think that's because Giving Tuesday isn't so popular. You'd be surprised the amount of people who search for what is Thanksgiving every November in the UK. That was quite interesting, but besides the point. The kind of spikes here that we see, just the kind of term growing over the years, and then a couple spikes in recent years, and then some kind of more spikes here. So if you haven't used Google Trends, it's a really great way to look at search terms and see how the kind of public are reacting to them. And I posted a video on my LinkedIn about how we've been reacting to the word donate during the pandemic, but also since 2004, I think it was. That was some pretty interesting insight, I think. So you can have a look at that video when you have some time. But anyways, getting back to the task at hand. So first out of the gate were LBS and Imperial College London, both of which should be commended for the way that they went about trying something new, and to be bold and to take risks on something that hadn't been tried before. And we'll hear about LBS's experience in a bit. And since then, the number of Giving Days has grown with a huge jump in 2018 and again in 2019. and then that jump would have been even greater in 2020, but we all know what happened there with the pandemic, and that either temporarily delayed appeals, or in terms of some direct mail, telephone campaigns, canceled them altogether. And I'll talk about what we saw with Giving Days in the pandemic in just a bit. But before I do that, I also wanted to take a look at the breakdown, apologies, of Giving Days by country, and how much the UK has embraced them over the last few years. So the UK in this chart is the purple, and you can see the difference between 2017, 18, even in 2020, a huge proportion of institutions, colleges, schools, Oxbridge running Giving Days, and yeah, this kind of stack here would have been on top, but these Giving Days just got delayed. But still, a good proportion of people who are running them in the new year, which is exciting to see. So in terms of the pandemic's impact on Giving Days, this is kind of what we saw, where most were delayed, again, but not canceled, with the majority still going ahead in the late summer or autumn of this year, and a few that have been moved to 2021, which was really common for institutions who were yet to run their first Giving Day, or perhaps were a bit risk averse, and that's completely fine. Of those who did go ahead, the vast majority saw increased in success of what they would have normally expected to see, whether this was their first Giving Day or continuation of already existing Giving Day program. Donors still came forward, and contribution from those donors supporting matches and challenges either stayed the same or grew from previous years, and the number of individual giving level donors also increased. And even though the number of donors may increase, perhaps donors may have given less. In LBIS's case, you'll hear that they gave more. So it's a kind of a real mixed bag, but the number of donors far increased what I think was to be expected given the situation in 2020. So like many in the sector who are running other kinds of appeals, perhaps direct mail or telephone campaign, teams made sure with their Giving Days to change their messaging to recognize the possible financial positions of their donors, while also being clear and transparent about the need. And for most institutions, the need was focused on student hardship and student support, and or the research directly related to fighting the pandemic. And Giving Days that went forward were really embraced, and they especially embraced the virtual element of their days in running webinars and online quizzes to increase the engagement that they may have normally seen on campus. And a special shout out to the team at INSEAD, who ran an amazing 24-hour kind of webinar program for their alumni, bringing them all together for their Global Giving Day, which is a really great example from Giving Days run previously, and how they adapted that kind of maybe on-campus activity that they would normally do, and how they embraced the kind of virtual environment to bring more people into the Giving Day activity than perhaps maybe they would have in previous years. So lots of embracing the virtual environments going on in 2020. So the University of York, they saw an uplift for both donors and income raised in 2020 from what they saw from their first Giving Day held in 2019. So here you can see the number of donors and the number of ambassadors and amount raised, which is excellent for their first Giving Day. And then, being able to achieve that and more in 2020 is excellent. And especially the amount raised, and to have more people coming forward in terms of matches and challenges, and a greater pool of donors to call from, and a kind of doubling of their ambassador numbers as well. And ambassadors was a great way to encourage people to get involved if a financial gift wasn't something that they were able to contribute, but they wanted to be a part of the success of the Giving Day, and to do something where they felt like they were making a difference. The same result was also true for Wadham College in Oxford, who ran their second Giving Day. So while the University of York's had always been planned for the autumn of 2020, Wadham's Giving Day was planned for the spring, and they just moved it back to the autumn, and that served them very well, So increasing, if not, doubling the number of donors that they had, and being able to also increase the income that they saw raised during Giving Day, which is great. But the success we saw wasn't just from days that had already been established prior to the pandemic. We saw lots of institutions, including HE, Oxbridge, schools, who were able to still run their first ever Giving Day with results higher than what we might normally see for a first Giving Day. So you have King's College London here, University of Strathclyde, with 694 donors, which is great, and Lucy Cavendish College with their first Giving Day with 320 donors, and a great proportion of income raised for all three. So, great success for those who had already started their Giving Day journey, and then equal success for those who had started it in 2020. So this is a good time, I feel, to hand things over to Jenna so that she can tell you a bit more about LBS's experience of running Giving Days over the last 5 years. And I'll be back after Jenna's talk to wrap up the session with a few lessons learned and some insights of what we predicted might lie ahead for Giving Day and things we're starting to see for the future.
So I'm just going to talk through London Business School's Giving Day, Global Give, what we've learned and just some key takeaways from the last 5 years. So before we ran our first Giving Day in June 2016, we had really limited expectations and didn't really create any KPIs. We were basically looking for a way to acquire new donors as we'd stopped doing our postal appeals and we didn't really have a telephone calling program in place. We'd also seen some case studies on Giving Days and it just seemed like a good fit for our audience given that we had a really global alumni base. So a digital fundraising activity was really appealing for that reason. Some of the other reasons around why we thought a Giving Day might fit well into our fundraising activity was just because it creates a sense of community, it would help strengthen our global network even further. And also as it's online, it just means anyone can take part. Our first Giving Day was very manual and was more of a test. And when it went really well, that's when we decided to bring Hubbub in the following year into year 2. And they were just able to provide us with, advice on how to deliver it and just talk us through our plan and strategy. You can see here what we've achieved over the last 5 Giving Days. The first year we decided to run it for 36 hours, but that proved to be very time consuming and quite difficult to run with such a small team. The figures overall over the last 5 Giving Days have varied, but we've managed to increase our alumni donors and monetary goal each year. Anecdotally, the biggest things that have changed are from year 1 to year 2, when we went from doing it in-house to bringing in Hubbub. This helped us just learn, as I mentioned before, just best practice and just making the logistics easier. In terms of strategy, this has remained fairly similar over the last 5 years. I guess every year we've just been more and more focused on the matching element and what's really in it for them, so our LBS community. Also, we've learned the importance of good ambassadors and just making sure the onboarding process starts really early. We've also just made sure that we've got a really strong focus message that resonates with each audience. And that's why we really heavily focused on segmentation as well, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. Years 1, 2, and 3 were very similar. There was a spike in numbers in year 3, which is when there was a big push for students. Year 1 and 2, we hadn't really included them, but we introduced students in 2018. Whereas years 4 and 5 have looked quite different. The look and feel changed due to our brand relaunch, and the messaging moved from showing love for LBS and the nostalgia to focusing more on the doubling your impact thanks to the match funding, which seemed to work really well. We also added in early giving for the last 2 years. Last year was a calling campaign to LAG and Managed Prospects, which that directed them to the main gift form. Whereas this year we opened up early giving a week before on the Hubbub platform, and just made sure to weave in that messaging around early giving with other school comms rather than just standalone emails about Global Give. So we're just cutting down on the amount of comms that were going out. This year we only actually approached alumni. There were some classes, sort of mainly 2020s and 2021s, that had been affected the worst by the pandemic in terms of their overall LBS experience. And I didn't feel it was right to fundraise with these classes, so we decided to remove all students. This was also a case for staff and faculty. With a number of redundancies across the school, we wanted to keep everyone informed by other means, such as internal newsletter and via social media, that the event was still happening, but those three audiences didn't receive any emails on the day of Global Give. There was a lot of uncertainty around doing a giving day in a pandemic, but we'd been working on delivering a campaign called Now is the Time, which incorporated three elements, which was, first one was our biggest engagement event of the year, the Celebrate element, our Giving Day, which is the Invest element, and a co-learning piece, which is the Thrive element, which would all run parallel to each other and hopefully complement one another. We felt the goodwill and sort of excitement that would have come from the engagement event would then lead on nicely to the fundraising element. And likewise, the investment would then give them access to lifelong learning, creating a full cycle, which was the Celebrate, Invest, Thrive. To help determine expectations for the day, we used Hubbub's Giving Day Simulator, which allowed us to supply data from our last 4 giving days, which it also then benchmarks against similar giving days to give us a predicted number of donors and donations for year 5. Internally, we came up with a target of 500 donors, which was significantly lower than previous years, but this was based on several factors, such as not including an ask for staff, faculty and students, and just also taking current circumstances into consideration. But when we received the simulator results, they also came back with 500. So we felt this gave us confirmation that it was just an achievable target. We were really happy with the end results of 548 donations. We increased our average gift size over all years by nearly £100, and we raised a total of nearly 450,000, which is matched, which is almost 82,000 more than our previous highest amount, which was last year. So we're super happy about that. You can see on the left is the old branding. We used the hearts throughout the whole giving day, which again was sort of around the theme of a while of LBS. Whereas you can see the images on the right are our new sort of deep blue and red thread school branding, and the emphasis was more on the match funding and making sure we included the Now is the Time campaign and Now is the Time messaging throughout everything that we on social media, the comms, and any sort of messaging we sent on the day. In previous years, we've usually done an on-campus event as well, which you can see from the image on the left. We'd usually do food, drinks, balloons, activities, which would be the kickstarts of the day, and that was as well a really nice engagement tool for students. So this is our Global Give promo video, which was intended to capture why Global Give is so important, as well as just making sure it was very relevant to current circumstances.
Now is the time for our alumni community to come together and invest in LBS. It's time to invest in research that will make a real impact in the real world. Time to invest and ensure the best LBS learning experience. It's time to invest in filling our classrooms with the brightest minds from different cultures and backgrounds from around the world. Now is the time for our alumni community to come together and invest in LBS so we can deliver the better future we are all striving for when the world needs it most.
So Lessons learned. I mean, we've learned a lot this year, but there have been some key takeaways over the last 5 years. We've learned it's really important to create a connection between the event and our audiences. This is down to segmentation and how we talk to our alumni. This year, we wanted to segment based on donor journey and their connection to the school. In previous years, we had used the regional challenges, which were done as part of the segmentation, but we realized that didn't work very well. So this year was about creating more of an emotional connection. By doing this, we increased our open rates by nearly 2% and increased our click-through rate by nearly 1% compared to 2019. Our click-through rate doesn't sound like much, but an increase, sound much of an increase, but we never usually get more than around 2% for our emails. So seeing 3% on average for Global Give was a huge success for us. Last year was the first time we did a social media campaign as well. And that drove 30% of traffic to the website and generated 11% of gifts. So I just made sure to have a solid social media strategy as part of the overall plan this year. We also tested retargeting, paid ads, and really amped up the use of WhatsApp this year, which helped us cut down on the amount of emails we were sending out. We've tried different things in terms of challenges. Last year, we tried, like I mentioned, all regional, but that didn't work for us. So we created 3 straightforward ones this year. One of which was for new alumni, which we passed in a matter of hours. I think that was down to the messaging itself. And we were talking a lot about the new alumni challenge and the earlier giving as well, so a week leading up to it. The other 2 were about creating momentum to help us get spikes in donations throughout the day and just keep us on track. The match funding is another key driver of the day, and we made sure we were working with the frontline fundraisers from the beginning of the project, so they could really start having those conversations with prospects early on. Objective, so being clear about what your objective is, money versus participation for us, and we just made sure that we had the planning around that of our activity based on that. And this was the driver that we based our KPIs on. And finally, planning. Planning is very important. I started the project plan probably around 8 months out, but I felt like I could have probably given myself more time as it was nearing the day, as things can take longer than expected when you're trying to run another event alongside it. Because part of the team is working on that, and the other part of the team is also working on Global Give. So I feel like I probably could have given myself more time on that, which is a lesson learned for next year. So it's been running for 5 years now, and we've had a lot of highs and some lows, but it's been, overall it's worked really well. And I think every year we're just making sure to refine it. We'll continue to run it in the autumn alongside our annual engagement activity, as that worked really well for us this year. And like I said, I'll probably just make sure that we give ourselves more time around the planning side, especially towards the end. It does allow us to leverage the event as well and just make sure the engagement is really driving fundraising. Next year, we'll be adding in faculty, staff and students, hopefully, particularly looking at what it means for students and how that sits along our graduating class gift. And we're also in the process of launching our next campaign in the next sort of 2 years. So we want to really sit down and think about how Global Give will sit alongside that. And just overall making sure that we're keeping it fresh and exciting year on year. And I just really look forward to seeing what next year brings.
So thanks very much to Jenna and for sharing your experience of LBS's Giving Days over the last 5 years. Some really interesting insights there, and some definite synergies from what we've seen over the past 5 years of running Giving Days here at Hubbub. But to wrap up this session, I'm going to go over a few things that I've learned over the past 5 years of running Giving Days with some really, really excellent and epic teams. And you may appreciate the Simpsons imagery that I've used in this section, just trying to keep things light and fun as we've all had a lot of Zoom calls and I'm sure a lot of webinars over the past couple of weeks. So I hope you appreciate it. But yeah, the first prediction that we had for Giving Days was that they would help to increase the level of visibility within the institution of fundraising, and maybe even the visibility of the institution itself. So Giving Days are very public. They are a bit hard to ignore if you're going on about them internally for 6 to 8 months, and hopefully being able to involve others in the institution as you run each campaign. So So thanks very much to Jenna for taking us through the last 5 years of LBS's global blah, 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 blah. So thanks very much to Jenna for taking us through the last 5 years of LBS's Global Give campaign and the experiences that they've seen, and definitely some common experiences from what LBS has seen and what we've seen and what I've seen over the last 5 years of running Giving Days, both here in the UK and Australia. So thanks so much for sharing that. So to wrap up this session, I'm going to go over a few things that I've learned over the past 5 years. You may appreciate the Simpsons imagery that I've used in this section. I just thought I'd keep it light, keep it fun. There's been a lot of Zoom going on, a lot of webinars. So I just thought, yeah, make it a little fun. But the first prediction that we had for Giving Days was that they would help to increase the level of visibility within the institution. And Giving Days are very public campaigns. They are a bit hard to ignore if you're going on about them for 6 to 8 months internally within the institution. People will start to hear about it. And hopefully that will help them to involve others in the institution as you run each campaign. So it may start small with just the development office team here being very excited about Giving Day. And then it might grow and get more engagement from other parts of the institution as they see the success and they see the benefit of running a Giving Day, and then spilling out to the wider reaches of the institution and getting everybody involved, from perhaps house porters to part-time staff to students to volunteers, all the way through to donors and the larger part of that giving community. But we also knew that this wouldn't happen overnight, but that it would perhaps be a more gradual experience for the institutions, and that it would build over time. Because these campaigns need that time to bed in, so that success can be seen, and then it can kind of become a part of the institution and a part of its fabric, year on year on year. So it may not be that in year one you see this level of engagement. It may just be the development office, but you're invested, you're bought in. Maybe the head of the institution is bought in as well, but you just need a little bit of time to show the success of the campaign, get others involved, and then keep growing that success year on year. And then the same prediction was also true in terms of engagement for major donors, and thinking that for some, a Giving Day would be more suited in the ways in which they hope to support and engage with the institution. The public nature of the Giving Day, again, lends itself well to those donors who want to be publicly recognized for the support, and who may want to support activities that are only present in the Giving Day itself. We also found that Giving Days were great for building a pipeline of future major donors, and that it often inspired donors at a higher level to come forward in their own ways after the success of the event had been realized. And we've seen on a few occasions where a Giving Day has finished, and then via email or perhaps in person when donors were able to go visit campus, that they came forward with, what would be considered a major gift, or the start of a major gift relationship. And it was somebody who wasn't on the kind of radar of the institution before, but because of the Giving Day, the very public nature of it, and the institution being behind it and putting its message out there, it gave the donor increased confidence to give that major gift. So it definitely helps to increase the visibility with our major donors. So the third thing that we've been saying for quite a few years is that not all giving days need to be 24 hours. And we've seen plenty of successful giving days run for 36 hours. And we do recommend that for in the first year or two to run your giving day for 36 hours, as it gives you more time to fundraise and for your supporters to get on board with the idea. It is a little bit more taxing than that 24 hours, and perhaps in subsequent years, you then go to a kind of 24-hour model. But using that 36 hours to help bed it in. We've also seen lots of teams get creative with their hours, tying them to important milestones in their history. So Trinity Hall had 67 hours to celebrate their 670th anniversary. Lots of giving weeks happening within the Oxbridge kind of sector. And then Strathclyde, who ran their day for 1,796 minutes, which is just under 30 hours. And that was to help tie in with the year that they were established as a university. So this next one isn't so much of a prediction as much as me being an advocate for your own sanity and future stress levels. I'm recommending that you perhaps not plan a giving day in a short period of time, and that you think about it like running a marathon. They are very, very similar. When you run a marathon, you want to be well prepared. You want to have done your training, done your practice, so that you feel confident and ready to take on that marathon, and feeling confident that at the end of it, you may be tired, but that you did it justice and you did yourself, proud. So I see them very similar. And we also had the kind of testimonial from Jenna as well about giving herself more time to do the planning. Because you want to just plan well in plenty of time. You have a much more enjoyable experience and better results than you perhaps would have if you planned the giving day in 6 to 8 weeks. My other planning advice is to approach the giving day in the same way that you might approach a capital campaign, because they're very similar in their DNA. So do things like a feasibility assessment. Consider your donor pyramid and pipeline when planning. Engage multiple team members and departments, create a working group, hold people to account, make objectives and goals. Make sure that you're collaborating on content. Giving days are very content heavy, so you want to make sure that you're collaborating and collecting that content throughout and then using it on giving day in the best ways possible. Again, as Jenna said, that you want to make sure that you are creating segmentation and comms plans that suit the donor journey that you would like those donors to go on throughout the day. So looking at the relationship that they have with the institution and what their donor relationship is and where you would like to start and end up. And then everything takes more time the first time around. So again, just make sure you're leaving enough time for planning, even if you think you can plan everything out. Things come from the left and the right and can delay your giving day. So make sure you have plenty of time to run it successfully. So the next takeaway that we've learned about giving days is that they work really well in institutions where affinity and warmth are high. And this can be either a natural affinity that we often see in schools and Oxbridge environments, or cultural affinity and warmth that we see in some of the HE institutions, York, Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds, doing great jobs of building warmth and affinity within their institutions. And there are several others. So if I didn't mention you, please don't feel offended. All doing a great job. But if affinity and warmth aren't currently high, think of what you can do to start increasing it over time that will help your alumni and other supporters to get to a place where their response would be overly positive, even if that response might be small in the beginning, so that if and when you do decide to run something like a giving day or another digital campaign, your alumni and supporters are ready and warm to start receiving that kind of appeal. So starting and speaking small, that's our kind of next takeaway, is to start small and grow over time. And because giving days are really public and you can see the results of others, it can be really intimidating to run a giving day. I completely see that. And to make it feel like you have to achieve a large number of donors or income for the day to be seen as a success. But each giving day is relative to its own institution, and it should only really be benchmarked in that way. It's good to share best practice, good to learn, lessons, but benchmark on your own success and go from there. And a good example of this is South Dakota State, who achieved really phenomenal results in 2020. But when they first started, they started small. So you can see here that the donor numbers are larger than what we might see here in the UK, but they are a very big collegiate university with a very big sports program behind them as well that they fundraise from very well. But the income figure is much more achievable for a first giving day, especially here in the UK, for even a smaller institution. So start small and build up year on year. And then this leads nicely into goals. So over the years, I've been asked more times than I could probably count what the goals or achievements for one institution should be benchmarked on another institution, even if perhaps they are in a similar setting. So Oxbridge to Oxbridge, school to school, HE to HE. And I'd like to take this moment to advocate that the goals that you set for your giving day aren't set based out of competition or the want to win and compete against one another, but are based off of your own data and what that is telling you. So do benchmark, but don't compete. And because these giving days again are really public, and you can easily see what another institution has raised, even I can, we can see what each of our clients has raised, but what we don't know sometimes behind that is what gifts are being counted and what other appeals may have been tied to a giving day, because we are now seeing that along with the giving day behind that, which I guess is a little bit of a kind of prediction, and what we are seeing is that giving days will become much more comprehensive in the way that they are built out. So yes, they may happen primarily online, and there will be a big email campaign that goes behind that, but so too will there be a direct mail element or a telephone campaign element, or both. So really play it safe, use your own data, set your own goals, and then grow from there year on year. My other suggestions for goals, just quickly, are that they perhaps are based on need rather than increasing year on year, which, to kind of maybe arbitrary numbers. When you base it on need, it delivers a better message inspired by impact. And we've seen how that's changed year on year for LBS and how that's really worked to their benefit. And your donors won't remember what was raised in the previous year. We would all love to think that they have, a nice post-it on their fridge that says, last year, my university raised this amazing amount, and I'm hoping to increase it this year. But most of them don't. So don't, think about the need. What is it that we need to raise? Perhaps what are our numbers that we'd like to achieve based on participation and income, and find a happy medium to then communicate that to your donors. And then finally, not hitting your goal shouldn't be seen as a failure. Most of the time, giving days that don't hit their target still raise a terrific amount of income from a large pool of donors, which really should be seen as a success in its own way. Being able to raise, a couple of £100,000 from a couple of hundred donors in a 24-hour period is an amazing achievement, and it really should be seen in that way. But if you don't hit your goals, it's also an opportunity to focus on what can be improved for future years, and whether that be setting more realistic goals for the future, having a rethink about those goals, perhaps a greater emphasis on contributions from match and challenge donors to help inspire individual giving donors to get on board and to give. Looking at those donor-led messages rather than institutional language, making it much about the donor and their impact. And then increasing the content and email and social media comms that perhaps you may have sent out in that first year, and maybe sending out more or increasing that engagement in subsequent years to try and increase the proportion of donors that you can get from those channels. So just before we wrap up, I want to leave you some early results from Giving Day emails that we've seen over the past couple of months. So we have seen this before. So I've showed this before, you may have seen it. And this is what we typically see from sending emails on a giving day. So the blue line is the target that needs to be kind of reached every hour in order for the institution to hit its eventual giving day goal at the end. And then the red line is the amount of actual donations that have come in, and the green dots are emails when they've been sent. And you can clearly see that every time an email is sent, the number of gifts made also increases. So every time we send an email, increase in gifts. And we keep seeing this again and again and again. And if I had time to pull all the data and put it into lovely charts, I would. But we are seeing this consistently. And you can also see that this particular institution also reached its goal before the end of the giving day, and this inspired people to keep on giving. So I think that's another question sometimes we get: if we hit our goal, do we increase it? You can, but people will still keep giving even if you don't increase that goal, because they've seen it, it's successful, they're engaged, and they want to give. So that's another takeaway as well. Because email is so important to the giving day. We said this a couple times throughout this session, but I just wanted to show you, a kind of real life example of what would happen if we didn't send any emails. If we just wanted people to rock up on the website, finding it through kind of their own means or through social media, that we would still see a good proportion of people giving through social media. So, upwards of 8% from social, which this was for first giving day, which is very good. And something then to work on in subsequent years, and a number of people giving through direct. But if we had never sent out any emails, or we had emails that couldn't reach our desired audiences, or that weren't written in the right kinds of ways, then we could have missed out on nearly 80% of the donations that we could have seen in that giving day period. So this is why emails are so important. So we're also now starting to see some benchmarks and trends in open rates. So our kind of benchmark for giving day open rates on emails is anywhere from kind of 20% to 50%. If it's in the 20s, then perhaps you may have some work to do in terms of subject lines, of content in the emails, of perhaps the deliverability of the email itself. And making sure that your audience is engaged in receiving that message and in opening that message. So this here is the kind of the beginning kind of countdown to giving day, the kind of pre-giving day messages, and we would expect there to be a high open rate for the first email, and then that that open rate may decline as we then get closer to the launch, which is about here. But I also will show you what happens with the click rates. But one of the questions that we asked ourselves when we started to send emails on behalf of our customers was, would people stop opening emails? Would they get email fatigue? And this and other instances that we've seen clearly shows that they don't. And I think people are very inquisitive about the giving day, about the event. They're looking for that social proof. They're looking to see how the total is doing, and that's why it's so important that you talk about those totals in your emails. You talk about the challenges, you talk about the matches, you talk about the milestones that you need to reach to keep those open rates on a kind of on a spectrum that keeps people engaged. So then we have unsubscription rate, because this is always the second thing that, yep, people are opening those emails, but how many people are unsubscribing? And I can happily say that we've consistently seen an unsubscribe rate of less than 0.5%. So 1% is the benchmark of what you want to see on each individual email. And we can see here that it's well below that. So I think, the scale of this looks like it's a lot, but, just pay attention to the percentage scale on the left-hand side. And again, people are happy to receive these emails. We give them opt-outs throughout. So when we send that first kind of save the date email, then we sometimes see unsubscribes, because this is the first time that people are seeing this kind of content, and perhaps they want to unsubscribe, and that's fine. And then we'll do it again for the kind of the first email on the day, to say we will be emailing you more than we perhaps normally would, and we know that perhaps you don't want to receive all of our emails. So if you want to opt out of giving day only, then you can do that. And we advocate for it. But again, there's not a huge uptake for that. So really positive. You will get unsubscribes, but they should be very low. And again, these people are only unsubscribing. What we recommend is just from Giving Day only, so that they're not unsubscribing from all of the communications that you may be sending them throughout the year. So I just wanted to show you how these all look together. And it's important, I think, that you not just look at open rates and click-through rates and unsubscribe rates individually, but that you look at them all together, because it starts to paint a different picture. So I said before about how email rates for opens were declining in the kind of pre-stages of the Giving Day, but that we saw click rates and click to open rates increase. And especially in kind of at this point here where we were really pushing, as LBS did, early giving. And if that's something that you can do to encourage early giving, because if people perhaps aren't around or they forget, they can make their gift early, but still be a part of the Giving Day. So even though open rates are declining, click-through rates are increasing, and that's a good sign. And then varying different open rates and click rates throughout the day. And what I would suggest here is that when you're looking at this data, you're looking at what the message is. So here, I want to look at what's happening because we have a high open rate, but we have a low click to open rate. So I want to know what's happening there. But then here we have a lower open rate, but then a very high click to open rate. And as Jenna was saying, the kind of click rate is in the kind of 2%, 3%. So if you're able to get, increased click rates and open rates on your Giving Day, then that tells you that those messages are things that your alumni and supporters are interested in receiving. They're interested in the journey. They're a little bit nosy about what's happening, especially as you send the kind of halfway emails to say, here's how we're doing, this is what's happening. But those emails are so important for building that social proof. So really dig into the detail of your emails and see what's working and what's not working. And please share those trends with others in the sector so we can all start to learn collectively. Great. Well, that is it from myself and Jenna. I really want to thank you for spending some time with us today. I hope that it was useful, a little bit insightful, and that there are things that you can take away from this session today. Also to let you know that CASE will be holding a Q&A session for this and the other on-demand webinars on Friday, the 4th of December at 12 noon. So make sure to attend that if you have any questions that you'd like to ask after watching. And you can also email Jenna and myself with any questions you might have. Our details are here on the screen. But for now, I hope everyone has enjoyed the conference and that you keep healthy and well, and we'll speak to you soon.